and in a very broad way. So he needs to bring it down. So the letters of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, represents that process of bringing down the ideas, bringing down the teaching from the teacher to the student, and each part of the process. So let's outline it. So the first part of the process is the Yud. The Yud is, the first thing is that the teacher needs, the mashpia needs to take, he has to condense, he has to contract the way he sees it, the way it's presented in his mind, in his understanding, which we said before in the extreme, that's the infinite, and he has to find that part of which he's able to share with the student. So finding that part, which is it's contracted, that's represented by the Yud. That part of what he's able to share. Then, after that, it's still only a point. It's still only it's very contracted, and it hasn't. He needs to develop that. He still hasn't. He needs to develop it within himself that he should be able to share it. To develop, meaning to develop within himself that the part of which he's able to share. That's the first hay. Okay. Then but that's still within him, within himself, within the teacher himself. He's still. This is part of the process. It's still not able to be shared with the student. Only afterwards, after he goes through the Yud part of the process and the Hey part of the process, then he can go to the Vav, which the Vav represents bringing it down and giving it over to the student. And the Hey is actually represents the student as he's able to receive that, the elaboration, the development of the idea, how the student is able to receive it and be able to internalize it. So the Vav represents the bridging the gap, but the Hey is the actual the receiving of the student to be able to understand the idea that the teacher is conveying. So we see there's a connection between the Yud and the Vav, and we see there's a connection between the Hey and the Hey. The connection is the Hey, the first Hey, is developing that idea that now, but it's still within the teacher, it's still within the mashpia, but developing the idea to where now it's something that he can share with the student. And the second Hey is the idea also, but it's developed, but the way that the idea is developed within the student. So the Heys, this is the Hamachpela, this is the double Hey. The Hey, the first Hey, right? The first Yud, the Yud Kei, and then the second Hey, where it actually comes down and is actually understood and internalized by the recipient, by the student. So that's the mashal to understand the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, to bridging this gap between the infinite, between the Bli Gvul and the Gvul. And everything that exists in the world, whether it's the physical world or spiritual world, on whatever level, comes through this process of the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Right? Because Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's it's almost like a conduit, it's transmission from the realm of Bligvul, from the realm of godliness, to bring it down into this world. Now within that process, you have different levels through which that comes about. As it's related, a person, understanding it in a physical sense, when a person is alive, he receives energy, he receives chayes in order to stay alive. Where does that come from? It comes from food, what he eats, what he drinks. That's giving him energy, on a physical sense. But obviously, his existence is not only on a physical plane, on a physical level, but also that he should be able to connect with Hashem. So this energy that he's getting is really, through that, he's reaching an awareness, he's reaching a connection with Hashem, with the Eibishter. That when you say that a person is living, what do we mean life? We're talking about life in its truest sense. Life in its truest sense is in that connection that he has with Hashem. So in his connection with Hashem, you have in this process, you have three different levels, meaning three different types of connection, three different levels of awareness that he has, in his growth, in his development, that he's able to actually recognize and contain and access the Eibishter. The first level is, as we said, it's through, we're using now the idea of eating and drinking as the process of which he's receiving the energy. So the first level is when he eats on a regular day, and he eats l'shem shamayim. He eats the food. So now the energy that he's eating, that he's consuming, that he's now discovering and recognizing through it Hashem and in his relationship with Hashem. So the first level is the fact he's eating and drinking, and he's discovering that the godliness which is in the food, which is it's giving him that that level of awareness, but it's hidden. It's hidden within the food. In other words, the food is a garment. It's a concealment. And the biggest proof of that is someone can eat the food and drink and have absolutely no awareness whatsoever in Hashem, because it's so hidden that he can get lost in the desire, in the physical pleasure of the food, that he completely can be distracted from what's really going on and what's really happening through his eating and consuming of the food. That's one level. So in other words, in order to get past that, when he eats, he needs to have the presence of mind to eat for the right reason, for the purpose of serving Hashem. And only then, in other words, the food is giving him energy, and the energy he's using to have these experiences of love, of fear, of understanding, doing mitzvahs, all of learning Torah, all of that, with the right presence of mind and the right awareness, so he's able to now access that godly energy. That's one level. Then you have a level of eating, which that is the eating of Shabbos. The eating of Shabbos, so now the concealment is less than you have during the week, which means that the food that you're eating has more, you're able to have access much easier to the truth, to the energy, the godly energy which is in the food. You're able to have access to that in a more direct manner. You don't have to struggle so much to get past these barriers, these concealments, but you're able to have access to the godly energy which is in the food. It still requires a level of avodah, and that is why that's on Shabbos we daven, and people, they used to daven for a long time on Shabbos, because to get to realizing the fact that this has tremendous potential, it says that Shabbos eating is a mitzvah. Shabbos, the whole idea when we eat is the pleasure that we receive from the food is a direct access to this divine energy. But in order to internalize it, in order to recognize it, to have this awareness, so the daven before on Shabbos that it shouldn't be any barrier. In other words, even on Shabbos, the world looks the same. If the world looked different on Shabbos, then the free choice would be gone. But the world looks the same. But it's a much lighter veil on Shabbos. The Mittler Rebbe writes that even one's heartbeat or pulse on Shabbos is different. In other words, he said, and the Rebbe brings down that we see what the Gemara says about the Sambati and the river, that on Shabbos it rests. In other words, you see a physical representation of this, but it's not always. It's. My grandfather used to say, he used to smoke, so he used to say on Shabbos he had no urge to smoke. In other words, he saw even a physical representation of this, even in a physical sense, even in a gashmistic sense, that he didn't have that urge. So he saw in that the idea of Shabbos, that veil. Yes, there's a physical world. We eat, we drink, we sleep, but it's much less, much more refined. It's much. It's not as. It's not as obstructive. So on Shabbos, the food that we eat, and this process gives us access to this divine energy in a completely different way. I said there are 3 levels, because in between Shabbos and the weekday, you have the eating of Yantiv. Yantiv is very interesting, because Yantiv is like a middle ground between Shabbos and during the week. Yantiv still, even though on Yantiv we celebrate and it's festive, meaning that it's the world is also on a much more higher place, a higher spiritual plane, but nevertheless on Yantiv we're allowed to cook, because Yantiv there's still a part in the process of that discovery of this divine energy that we're receiving from the food that is still needed. And in order to have direct access to that and not get lost in the physical sense, in the physical aspects of the food, so it says in the Zohar, it's brought down also in the Rambam, that a person should, on Yantiv especially, should invite poor people and give tzedakah. In other words, make them happy with bringing them to your table, because with that, it helps remove that veil. Shabbos, it's good to invite guests, but on Shabbos, that's not as required to have access to this divine energy, because on Shabbos, the whole world is elevated to a much higher place. On Yantif, even though it's the world is elevated, but not like Shabbos, and therefore a Yantif requires this this idea of inviting guests to help remove that veil that might obstruct. So what we're saying, Yigalel and Taime, what the Maimers are talking about, Yigalel and Taime, the B'srei Saname, that the B'srei Saname, the 12 breads, we said, has to do with Yishem Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, 3 names, on Shabbos is revealed 3 names of Hashem. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei 3 times, as Arizal explains. That's the 12 breads. Specifically, where is the revelation come? That's through the hay, as we explained before. And we're asking that even though now on Shabbos we also receive, if someone eats properly, like we said, he davens before, and does what's necessary. So on Shabbos he has access to this higher level of divine energy, this tainug. Nevertheless, it's still veiled. So we're saying Yigalel and Taime, that Hashem should reveal. When is it going to be completely unveiled? That's when Mashiach comes. So Yigalel and Taime, even on Shabbos, we said it's the higher level of eating. We have access to this higher divine energy. But nevertheless, Yigalel and Taime, that Hashem should reveal it, that it should be revealed. Now the revelation is coming through kfilא and klisha. What's kfilã and klisha? These are 2 aspects of the way the name. That's the words in the poem of the Arizal. That's the 2 aspects of kfilã. Refers to the hay, because the hay is doubled, and klisha refers to the vav. Like we said before, the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is part of the process of the dissemination from the Beligvul to the Gvul. So you have the kfilã, which is the double hay, and the klisha is the vav. But all represents that even though on Shabbos we have access to this higher level, but nevertheless it's coming through these filters. And Yigalel and Taime, we're asking that it should be revealed, that now it should be when, which is going to be when Mashiach comes, that it should be the Yud-Kei, the first 2 letters. And that's what it says, that when Mashiach comes, it says that it should be, that it says, Bayom Ahu Yiyeh. It'll be, Yiyeh is Yud-Kei. That even the Vav-Kei, the Kfilã Klisha, which is the filtering down, even what we do have access to on Shabbos, it's still filtered. So Bayom Ahu Yiyeh, that it should be the Yud-Kei, that we should have access to the divine energy without this veil. That's the general idea of the mind.